name's Raza Kamaluddin. I'm a television producer. I make corporate films and I've also made documentaries. I'm British. I was born in London. I grew up in Surrey. I lived in Oxford, lived back in London, lived in Surrey again. And most recently, for the past 6 years, I've been living in and working in Malaysia, which I really enjoy, and I make corporate films there. I do documentaries there as well. One of the things that really attracted me about moving to Malaysia was the warmth of the people when I was working there, when I was visiting there. I found that the people were very engaging. The work ethic was very different in the way that I find sometimes in other countries it's a very cold way of doing business, where in Malaysia they take you out for lunch, they take you out for dinner, they want to get to know you. It's a perhaps sometimes slower way of doing business, but at the same time it's a warmer way, and the business relationships you do make, you kind of nurture over a long period of time. It's not short-term business, it's actually a long-term business plan which they have with you. And once they gain your trust, and once you gain their trust, you can carry that through for not just a short period of time, but for a long period of time, sometimes years, or even with some people, decades. The great thing about Malaysia is it's a Muslim majority country, and it's very multicultural. So you have a lot of different ethnic and racial groups that make up the country. And because it's a Muslim majority country, I feel as a Muslim I feel very comfortable being there. But at the same time, you can get the benefits of living in an environment where it's open and it's inclusive, and it's more exposed than being in a very insular type of country. And that's one of the real advantages of being there from a social perspective. Another thing that really appealed to me in Malaysia is also the business environment. As I say, it's a very warm environment where they encourage relationships over a long period of time. And that was very attractive, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to move out to Malaysia. And of course, the business environment has a lot of opportunities. There were a lot of aspects which I could explore in terms of clients, in terms of business opportunities. The growth market is very attractive, not only in Malaysia, but also in the region. And one of the advantages that Malaysia has is definitely it's a Muslim majority country. Also, English is quite widely spoken, if not spoken in nearly all of the major cities. It also is less prone to natural disasters. In fact, there's very rarely, if ever, natural disasters occur in Malaysia. It's got a very sizable land mass, which means that it has the geography and also has a very decent size and a healthy population size of around 30 million people. So in terms of doing business, in terms of tapping into the talent pool, you have a lot more options in order to explore. And those are some of the advantages. Of course, it has a very sound political system. It has a sound legal system based on UK law. And of course, it also has a very sound financial system as well. So in those elements, it's very stable. At the same time, the currency is very attractive, being British. And therefore, I find it very cost effective living there compared to when I was living in the UK. It's not all roses. Doing business in Malaysia. There are, of course, some challenges in terms of setting up businesses as well. Sometimes some of the processes can be quite bureaucratic. Whilst English is widely spoken, a lot of business in terms of setting up companies, setting up structures is done in Malay, which is the national language of Malaysia. And sometimes that can be a bit challenging, but usually you can find an agent or find an intermediary that will help you through the process. Saying that, there are also a lot of incentives by the government to encourage some industries and some types of industries to set up businesses in Malaysia, where they nurture you, or they encourage you, or they provide various incentives, whether it be tax-free incentives, ease in terms of getting visas, and various other incentives which they offer. One such incentive is under the multimedia super corridor. So if you're a technology-based company, for very little paperwork, you can set up your company. You do need a local partner for pretty much all of these, because a lot of the paperwork, as I said, is conducted in Malay, and it does help having a local partner to be able to help you with that. So it's not really easy. There are some, once you get used to it, once you learn the technique and you learn the different systems and the structures that are in place, then it's a bit easier to have a better understanding of how to do business there. I set up a television production company in Malaysia whereby we created high quality content at very affordable rates, which the content could stand up to international scrutiny, so we could broadcast on channels all over the world. And that's something that's not really being done in Malaysia at the moment. One of the barriers is language, because they're not entirely confident in English. So a lot of the content is produced in Malay, or even in the other dialects such as Mandarin or Tamil as well. When I moved to Malaysia, what I decided was to create high quality content which we could make in Malaysia using the talent pool of Malaysians, and yet make it so that we could export it internationally, and that would be the first time that's ever been done. So I wanted to create a local homegrown company in Malaysia with a Malaysian partner where we were able to capitalize on that. And the content that I was looking to create was not only documentaries, which I have done one or two, but also entertainment television as well, which was not sensitive. A lot of content this day and age is subject to some areas where it could be censored due to the nature of its content. What I wanted to do is, what I felt we could do was create good content, high quality content, family viewing content, which we could make in Malaysia, take advantage of the cost base of producing, but be able to export it internationally to other markets outside of Malaysia. I've done a few documentaries. One of the documentaries I did was about a talented, it's like a talent school, and it was called Permata Pintar, which is a Malay expression, but I broadcast that on Islam channel. And it's a documentary where they encourage gifted children and they accelerate their learning. So they go into a special learning program in a university environment where they prepare them for university. They accelerate them through all their learning processes, through their coursework, so they're far advanced of students of their peers. And then they're prepared for university. They go to university early, which are Ivy League universities in the US, and then they're encouraged to come back to Malaysia afterwards to help promote Malaysia and help put Malaysia back on the map. One of the documentaries which I think was really interesting, which I was involved in, was a documentary about a couple of victims of torture that were tortured in Iraq around the time of 2003, just after the US war on Iraq. And I think one of the things that really interested me about this documentary was because I'm very interested in human interest stories anyway, I find these are very interesting pieces where you can really understand people's experiences, their life, what they've been through, and from their perspective. And it gives you an insight into their life, into what they've been through, which we ordinarily wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And they'd never been interviewed before, these two Iraqis. They were flown over to Malaysia to be, they were involved in a trial where they were used as witnesses. And I was given the time where I was able to take them into a room separately and interview them and understand the true horror of what happened to them from A to Z. So I sat them in the room and they just explained to me via a translator from A to Z exactly what happened, and each one was about 3 hours. Each of the interviews was about 3 hours long, and they explained, I mean, absolutely horrific things that happened to them, and from that we were able to compile and make a fairly decent documentary about it, of not only their experiences but also about the trial and the process of the trial, where we interviewed some of the people behind the scenes and who actually put the trial together. The name of the documentary is Blood on Their Hands. And it's all about a show trial, which is basically a trial that has no that has no jurisdiction, has no value in essence, cannot be enacted upon once the result has been announced by the judges. The judges, however, and the entire trial is conducted under normal trial conditions. So there's a panel of international judges, and the rest of the process is all carried through as a normal trial would be under international law. The trial has no legal basis, no legal standing. What we found out during the interview and during the trial was that the lady was claimed she was directly tortured by American soldiers. In particular, she described the woman who tortured her. And at one point a man was present as well, but of course an American uniform, and the woman was very clearly American with an American accent and in her uniform as well. With regards to the man that was tortured, He saw American, he was blindfolded for a lot of the time while he was tortured, but he did see American uniforms and American boots, and he heard American accents as well. So he knew the Americans were present and were, if nothing else, watching and aware that the torture was going on. What was quite interesting is to see how a trial works when the people put on trial are not there and they're tried in absentia. So they were represented by someone called an amicus curiae, who is appointed on their behalf to represent them and to defend them so that they can have some level of defense. The main purpose of having a show trial is to document the evidence, document the facts in as realistic and as close as an environment to a trial as you can get, that has all the functions of a trial and all the credibility and the structure of a trial, just doesn't have the legitimacy of a trial. But at the same time, once you produce that evidence, once you produce the results exactly as a trial is, then you can have those in a booklet or in written documentation, which can then be used in the future and will hopefully not be forgotten. And at least you can have a record of the crimes that were committed, even if it's not enforceable. It creates awareness, I think, which is probably the most important thing, and brings to light exactly what has been happening and what's been going on. In this trial, I think the important fact is that we were able to discover the stories of the people that were tortured in Iraq, some of them even in Abu Ghraib prison, at the hands or under the American administration during 2003, 2004. I think when I'm making documentaries, of course, human interest really stimulates me. I find that quite fascinating. I find speaking and learning about different communities, different types of people that maybe I haven't come into contact with, I find that very interesting, because not only does it give you an insight into whatever you're making a documentary about, but it also gives you an insight into their life outside of that, whatever you're making. I think the empathy side of human interest stories is something that appeals to everybody, because they can relate to certain human characteristics, which everybody has, but it's just in a different scenario or different environment. And I think that's what makes it interesting, is that there's certain elements which you can relate to, but in a different environment. Some recent work which I'm doing, or one of the projects I've been involved in for the past 12 months or so, is a community transformation project in one of the hill stations in Malaysia. And they have a number of different ethnic groups. Of course, you have the Malay Muslims who make up the majority there. And we've been doing a lot of different projects to empower the children in particular by going, we've had the support of the schools, whereby the principal of the school has been very positive. She's encouraged this, where we go and we do workshops with the school children. We give them activities. We put them into groups where they can mix with other ethnic groups at the same time. So normally what would happen is they would be sometimes they'd be a bit more insular or mixed with their own communities and their own ethnic groups. But what we've been trying to do is break them out of that, so that each one can have an understanding of how the others are. And we get them to do activities together with the objective after 2 days of coming up with a project, a large project which they can do, whether it be a community-based project that can be something which they can run for the long term or even for the short term that will benefit the community, whether it be cleaning a certain area, environmental projects or other related projects which are interesting or important that they feel and they would choose themselves. Working on this particular documentary has been really interesting because the children themselves are very passionate about doing things about the community, about helping, and they're also very fresh. They haven't been, in some ways, beaten down by all the negatives that some adults have actually gone through. So they're still open, they're still receptive, they still believe that they can make change, and so that's really interesting to work with. They have a lot of passion, they have a lot of vibrance, and they want to learn. They want to do more for the community. They want to do more for themselves. And so what we're doing is just providing them with a platform where they can do that. And that's what's really interesting, because you're not wanting it more than they want it for themselves. They actually want it more than you want it. So everything that you're helping them with, all the assistance and support you're giving them, they're really taking and they're trying to make use of it as much as possible. And that's what's really nice to work with, where they are so keen, they are so receptive, they are so open, and they're so willing to work with you and take your advice. I really do enjoy working on these kind of documentaries because it makes me feel satisfied that I've actually achieved something as well. It's not just about making the documentary, it's not just about making the content. Yes, that is an important part and you do have something to show, but what I think is really important is that you leave something and you have the satisfaction that you left something behind which is carrying on afterwards, which people are benefiting from. And I think that leaves me with a sense of achievement. So every time I go to the Hill Station, even now, people still remember the work that we've done, which makes me feel really happy. I think doing this kind of work is all part and parcel of the Deen, because it's giving to the community, it is helping the community, it's helping people that are perhaps less fortunate than ourselves, and it's giving them a sense of empowerment as well, which I think is really important. And these are all qualities which I think every Muslim should have, and people generally should have anyway. In terms of future projects, I have a lot of very ambitious ideas in what I want to do. Of course, I want to carry on making documentaries, which I find really interesting. Again, they're maybe not profitable, and it's not about making money, but it's more about making something that's really interesting that you can feel fulfilled. And I think that's what I also want to carry on doing. I do have other ideas, I do have other ambitions. I also want to make entertainment television, and I think there is a model which can be used where you can make high quality entertainment television, which can be compelling, that doesn't need to be censored for family viewing. I think that's a very important part. I would also like to go into, and one of the areas I'm also exploring is making short films. And I'm currently discussing and finalizing details at the moment about the first few short films that we're going to make, and probably in the coming weeks and months that will become more apparent. I think for budding filmmakers, there's a great piece of advice that was given, not only to me, but I've heard being given to many people who are aspiring. The most important thing is, once you get the idea, you just go out and you start making it. If you've got a camera, and in this day and age, the barriers to entry are so low. It's so cost effective. You can make great content at a fraction of the price. And if you have a camera and you have some basic sound equipment, basic light, sometimes you don't even need all of that. You can still go out and make some very good content. And I think the most important thing is you just go out there and you start doing it. You start filming. You start getting in there. If you start spending your time going or trying to look or research or do too much, you can get bogged down in the detail, and you'll never get making content, and you'll be thinking about it for the next 10, 15 years, and at the end of it you'll have nothing. So the most important thing, and this has been given to me, and I've heard it being given, as I said, to many budding filmmakers, is just go out there and start doing it.